welcome to a new series of Living Memory Association podcasts following our Shops and Retail Reminiscence and Heritage project. In this first introductory episode, we hear from our friends and visitors about some of their earliest shopping memories. From outings to Forsyths to favourite sweetie shops, join us as we go away for the messages.
When I was probably about 6 or 7, that would be about 1970-71, my grandmother took me to Forsyths. That was on the corner in Princess Street, long gone now. And she bought me a yellow dress, a bright yellow dress. And I remember I only wore it once or twice because my mother thought it was too frilly and too fancy. But I'll remember that yellow dress.
I was small, of course, it was just after the war, so there wasn't a lot going on in the shops. But this man called Abraham Noble Cresty had a grocer's shop. He wore the whites and the apron, stuff like that. And he was very good to people who didn't have much money or couldn't afford to buy food. They used to make up boxes and bags of broken biscuits and give you them for a penny, stuff like that. Or if you were short, he would give you credit, or tick, as they called it in these days. Yeah, you had to pay on a Friday when your husband got the wages. But if you didn't pay it, he used to put your name in the window to tell people who you are and why you haven't paid.
In the 90s, I had a lovely ice cream shop with the best ice cream I've ever had, called Bimbo Ice Cream. And it was on the top of like a hill at the top of a church that we used to go to on a Sunday. And after church, our parents would take us into this Bimbo Ice Cream for a lovely ice cream and waffle.
And whereabouts was this?
Uganda, in a city called Kampala.
One of my earliest memories was going down to the boot store, actually, when I was a student, because I lived in a student hall on the Mound and it overlooked Princess Street. So that was my main shopping street because there wasn't a lot of shopping action going on in the old town. So if you wanted anything, you did have to go into Princess Street or beyond. And I did buy a cafetiere in the Boots in Princess Street for my student room in my hall. And that was one of the kind of first purchases that I made in Edinburgh. One preceding that was I discovered the William Lowe supermarket on Broughton Road, which is now a Tesco, and I went in there to get some hand wash detergent so that I could wash my smalls and my socks in my little sink in my student hall.
I was once walking past Jenner's with my grandmother, and my grandmother came from Inverness and had a very concise diction. Her parents ran a hatters and milliners and umbrella walking sticks, things like that, in a shop for the gentry. And we were going past Jenner's and she turned round and she said, "You don't look in that shop window. That's for the toffs, not for the likes of you and I." That was me put firmly in my place.
There was a sweet shop on Bath Street, which was a famous shop that all the kids used to go into. And the chap who worked there was very changeable, and then he could be very happy to see you, or sometimes you'd go in and it would seem like he didn't want you to buy any sweets at all. Sometimes you went in and it felt like they were his sweets and he didn't want you to have any of his sweets at all. And other times he could be super friendly. So I don't know whether his moods went up and down, but he had a wonderful array of sweets. And it sold sweets and really cheap plastic toys, but it was mostly sweets in the old jars, and he got them down from the shelf, unscrewed the top and then weighed them, and then got a bit annoyed if you didn't just accept whatever he'd poured in, even if it was slightly more than you'd asked for. But it was a great shame that disappeared.
I remember back in the late 70s and early 80s when I was living at home, and every Thursday night we had a van called the Blue Van, which came with fruit and veg and sweeties, crisps, all kinds of other things like that, juice, and I used to get given 50p. Me and my best friend Vida, would get our 50p's and run out to the Blue Van very excited and buy our crisps and chocolate on the Thursday night just before Top of the Pops.
I remember the Victuallers just at the end of Bread Street, the beginning of the Westport, and it was quite a shopping thoroughfare there, but the Victuallers was very special because you could buy porridge oats, pinhead, mealhead, all the different kinds of porridge oats. It was a speciality, but you could also buy food for your pets, and the man always wore a brown overall, and it was a family business. It was called Thompson's the Victuallers, and everything was in big sacks, Hessian sacks or paper sacks, and it was all around the floor. It wouldn't get away with it now, but there was always cats in the store, and I wondered why they had so many cats, and that was probably to keep any pests at bay. But you would go in and the man would serve you. You didn't touch anything, he would serve you, and there was big trays of eggs, porridge oats, rice, everything that you could think of, and he would weigh it out. You would ask, maybe you would just get a quarter a pound or a half a pound or a pound, and he would serve it to you, and it was all wrapped in nice strong brown paper bags. But all down that street, down the Westport, there was different shops. There was a fruit shop, and we used to go in there and get chipped fruit, because in those days, going back to the 50s, people were very poor. Wages were at an all-time low. It was after the war, so everybody was struggling. There was no family planning, so there was big families and little money. So we eked it out as best we could. So there was a second-hand shop down that street as well in the Westport. We used to get second-hand clothes, and he was such a good, the stuff was good. So you had the fruit shops, you had the victuallers, you had the bakers. And my dad's shop wasn't really a shop. It was kind of like a wee lock-up, a garage down Bread Street Lane, and he sold and made flowers, artificial flowers out of crepe paper, and he'd wax them in that wee shop. And he also sold fresh flowers that he would get out the market, out the fruit market, but also sold fresh fruit. So sometimes he'd bring a tray of fruit back to us that was kind of chipped, that we'd get for free because it was going buckshy along with the flowers that he bought. So I would used to man the shop on a Saturday afternoon, or maybe all day Saturday, but especially a Saturday afternoon, and my dad would put all the flowers into a basket, and even that, the baskets were handmade by a basket weaver. The man used to come and make the baskets, and my dad would order them to size. And then he would fill them with the flowers and go off to sell his flowers at the hospital, the Royal Infirmary as was then. He'd wrap them all up in paper, and there was a special knack of wrapping up in this white paper. And then he would also go down to the bus station to sell the flowers. People maybe finishing their work on a Saturday night, maybe going to see their loved ones or their girlfriends or boyfriends, and he would wrap the flowers up and sell them there as well.
I remember as a child in a shop, I think my mother was looking for clothes for myself, and I walked into a swing mirror, breaking it, which resulted in me cutting my hand and having to get a stitch put into it.
This would have happened, it must have been about 1986, maybe 87. My family and I were living in Mexico in the north in a city called Monterrey, and this actually wasn't something for me, it was for my older sister. These lovely kind of elastic belts, they're usually quite a bright colour, and then they clip together, and the clips are a kind of design. So it was my sister's birthday, and she loved the colour yellow, and we would always dress, I was always dressed in blue and her always in yellow, and so my younger sister and I just decided that she had to have this butterfly yellow elasticy belt that clipped together with these lovely yellow metal hooks. First of all, we saved up, because it's not as though we had a lot of money ourselves. I won't remember how much it was, but we could afford it at an effort, and I think that my dad maybe pitched in a little bit of the money too. But we bought her this, and she absolutely loved it. But of course, I always was trying to steal it and wear it myself, because as kind as I was, and as much as I love my sister, of course I wanted it.
I remember I used to get my threepence pocket money on a Saturday, and I used to go along to a wee sweetie shop at the bottom of Morton Street in Joppa, and it was a perfect wee sweetie shop because it had all the selections of your penny chews, your fruit salads, and the other mixture you could have. And it was always a dilemma whether you spent the whole threepence on one thing or whether you divided it up and got more. One time I remember having spent my sweetie pocket money on sweeties, coming home, and the next day I wasn't feeling very well, and my dad, who was a GP, said, "Oh, you've eaten too many sweets." That turned out to be appendicitis.
And my memory goes back to Linlithgow. That's where I was born and brought up, until I went off to sea. But the one thing I always remember about the going shopping was we always shopped at the Co-op. Now, one thing everybody of my name, my age will know is their mother's store number, as they called it. Ours was 4209. I still remember that number. But you used to take money along to this check-in place, and you got tokens. which were various denominations, and you used these tokens to buy whatever purchases you wanted. And in Linlithgow there were the co-op, as is now, used to be 3 stores. There was one that sold clothing, one that sold general store, and then there was a butcher's. So you had these tokens that you could take to each of the stores and buy whatever it was, and using them. You couldn't use money in these places. You had to change it always for tokens, these checks as we called them. There was a £1 cheque, a 50p cheque, 10 cheque, 5 cheque, a 2 cheque and a penny cheque, and you get that. So you had to pass these little plastic things, so you passed these across the counter for whatever purpose it was you were buying.
I was speaking to a friend who lives in Orkney these days. He's visiting Edinburgh, and he knows I live near Tollcross, and he reminded me back in the early 60s of the Goldbergs store, which I don't remember. I wasn't in Edinburgh then, and he was very young. And what he liked about it was, he'd never seen this before, was the doors that you walk up to and they open, the electric doors, which of course are very common now. And so that's all he came for. He never bought anything. But the coincidence is, I do know the son of the original Mr. Goldberg, who lives in Glasgow these days. And I told him the story, and he was delighted to hear about it.
Thanks for listening to episode 1 of our Away for the Messages podcasts. Remember, you can follow the Living Memory Association's Facebook and Twitter pages to see photos from our vast archive. Or why not watch some of our fascinating Object of the Day features on TikTok? Join us again soon for more memories and stories of shopping history. Cheerio!